Tilt is one of those things that will lose you so many games. Tilt was a term first used in poker, where a player would get upset and frustrated and then lose all of their money because they kept playing while they were frustrated. The same thing applies in Hearthstone. Once you begin to tilt, it often snowballs into you getting more and more upset, and you play a less and less optimal strategy. Oftentimes, players don't even realize when they are tilting because it's such an emotional effect that it becomes part of them. They're not exactly angry at the game, they're just somewhat frustrated. Even being lightly frustrated can often have detrimental results and will make you lose games. Tilting is normally caused by variance, and I'm going to go over a couple methods that I use to both prevent and avoid tilting. Now, the first thing to prevent tilting is understanding variance, and understanding that variance will happen and you will lose games because of variance. Sometimes you take a hand and you full mulligan it and you're left with all of your late game cards and nothing to do at the beginning of the game. You can't control that outcome. You did the best that you could by mulliganing away already bad cards, and now you have bad cards instead. Sometimes your opponent can primordial glyph into a fireball and kill you. You couldn't do anything about that. Sometimes these things just happen. We have to understand initially that going into a game of Hearthstone, that this thing might happen in the next game. When you really truly understand that, you just push tilt off a little farther. Understanding that you may not win this game purely based on skill, or you may not lose this game purely because your opponent outskilled you, is the first step into avoiding tilting. It's hard to get upset when you are already prepared to understand that you could lose this game by no fault of your own. You also need to understand that you can't win every single game. This is something that I fall into a trap of very often, especially when I get on a win streak and I'm winning 5, 6, 7 games in a row, and then I lose a game. I want to immediately analyze why I lost that game, and then I get frustrated that I did lose it, especially if it was completely out of my control. One thing to think about is that professional Hearthstone players will lose games all of the time. Maybe not super consistently, but they will lose games. Nobody has a perfect win record. In fact, it's probably impossible to have a perfect win record due to the variance of a card game. And Hearthstone even more so. We don't just have the variance of the cards that you draw, but we also have the variance of generated cards and random effects on cards and discovered cards and all that kind of thing. It's also good to realize that no one plays perfectly. Tilt can come from understanding that you played something and you played suboptimally and you want to go back and fix that, but you can't because you don't have a time machine. Understand that no one plays 100% perfectly. Even professionals make mistakes. It's easy when you come into that mindset to not get upset over a mistake that you made. One thing that helps me out with this is looking at a game of chess. With chess is known for punishing you for playing poor mistakes, where your opponent can take advantage of your mistakes and either win the game or win a piece. That usually leads to winning a game just off of one mistake. That can be very frustrating, especially when you're playing against someone who's much better than you. Add variance into the mix and tilt is just going to happen. When you look at a game of like Magnus Carlsen, one of the greatest chess players in the world, or Hikaru Nakamura, one of the other best players in the world, when you study one of their games and then see that based on what the computer says, they probably played a little worse than what they could have optimally played, can kind of help you understand that no matter how good you get, you can always get better. Getting upset about your mistakes is definitely one of the worst things you can do and will often maximize your chance to tilt. Now, if those are things that can prevent you from tilting, what are some things we can do to avoid tilting once we're already playing games? One thing that I like to do is that after I lose 3 games in a row, I will quit playing and either play some other game or just take a break and walk away from the computer. Even if I'm not upset, even if I understand that there was variance, this just avoids any possibility that some frustration might be seeping into my play. Again, we really just want to avoid the fact that any emotions dictate our play. Another thing I found is playing decks that have less variance in them. Some decks have a lot of randomly generated cards. A good example of this is Highlander Mage. Highlander decks already have a large amount of variance because there's one copy of each card. You're less likely to draw the specific card that you need in specific scenarios. That on its own can lead to tilt, but Mage goes a step further by having lots of randomly generated cards. Oftentimes you can generate the exact card that you need, and that feels good. But when you spend a few games generating nothing of particular value, that can be very frustrating. We also need to just accept that tilt will happen. Nobody's perfect. Everyone gets upset. professional poker players, professional chess players, professional Hearthstone players. Everyone will be tilted at some point in time. You have to learn to accept it, that you got tilted, and accept that you will be tilted, and then learn to deal with the after effects, whether that's just not playing the game or just taking a break. And this is bound to happen if you get invested in the game, especially while playing competitively. So be sure to take care of yourself. Look after your mental health. Understand that this game is still just a game, and you can always just play another game of Hearthstone. One single game of Hearthstone will not define your career in Hearthstone. You will eventually play thousands upon thousands of games. Your career is the summation of all of these games. Don't let one game poison the next game you play. So I hope this video provided at least a little bit of value for you. If you thought it did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any comments or any questions, feel free to comment on this video below, or if you just completely don't like the video, also feel free to comment so that I can see what I can do better. But I think that's it for me today.